So I've got Spotfire Analyst open here. Okay, so the first step is basically to bring your data in. And so when Spotfire Analyst first opens up, it'll show this plus sign. That's really the place where you go to grab data. And so you'll see there's a connect to option. That's really more for databases. So if you want to ever connect and pull from databases, that's available there. But we're going to basically pull it in from a local file. So we're going to go to this local file option here, browse local file. Of course, I downloaded them here, hopefully. There we go. We'll do one file at a time. It doesn't really matter what order. If we're going to be setting up relationships between these, we can do that after the fact. So you'll just select the CSV file, and then it's going to prompt you with this type of screen. This only happens with flat files like Excel or CSV files, is it gives you the opportunity to look at the data and understand if it's in the right format, how it's delimited. It does a pretty good job of guessing, and it knows it's a CSV file because it's pick comma. But some of the things to watch for are, yeah, in this case, it's pretty a well-defined data set. The interesting thing is this one doesn't have a column name here. So it's going to basically call it column 1. But you can see here it's allocating the names from this first row. So it knows the first row is the columns. The only thing to watch for here is the assignment of the types. So here, the string, it's usually pretty good. You can see it's allocated this one correctly. These ones look good, real. So I always make sure I go across and check sorry, my Zoom thing is in the way here. I want to move that there. So we look good here. I don't think there's anything here that you would want to reset the type on. Sometimes it has a problem with dates. Okay, so we'll pull that in. And we're just going to bring that in as a data source by itself like that. And that's pretty much it. So we'll do that with both those tables. So I'll repeat that. Browse local file. Grab the second one here. One thing I didn't check to see, it looks like there's only a single data table or a single tab in this Excel, the CSV, sorry, never mind, Excel. So again, just checking integer, string, real. Oops. Try to size that. Okay, Boolean. Okay, those all look good. Just to confirm, this is a time field. There's not dates in here. But yeah, you've got a separate date column here. Okay, good. Okay. And we'll add that data table. So now when you look at this, the best way to view this is to look at the data canvas. So that's this little icon down the bottom here, if I can get rid of this one here. And so you'll see this data canvas lets you look at the data sets that you brought in. So we'll go back to this first one. And so it's showing me all the data that's imported. And here is where you can do different transformations on this data. So is there a need for you guys to understand a bit more of the kind of transformation work that needs to happen with this data set? Or is it pretty much just go from here to visualize and or run data functions on it? Maybe just give me some idea.
I guess for the participants, Steve, you'll see that Q source is repeated twice in both CSV files, but they actually designate different things as the first point. And then the second point is we have associated satellite imagery, which will be, I guess, somehow attached to one of the columns here as well. But obviously that's not part of the current exercise here. Okay, so if I understand you, is there a join between these two data sets? These two tables that you want to do? The source on the source ID. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So now I've got both data sets here. I can do that in two ways.
My preference is to then create a new data table based on those two input tables. So you have the originals available. So what we would do in this case is we would go to other. So what other lets me do is it lets me grab one of these data sources and create a new data source from it internally. And then what I can do is from that, I can then join that and it's going to be a join to add columns, right? So that it'll basically be a combined data set. So I can use the add columns function. So I'm basically taking a plus here, and then I'm going to grab the other table, which was the second one here. And it's going to ask me on how do I want to do that join. So in this case, you'll see this settings for added columns, and this brings up the match. Now it's going to do its best based on the column names. It looks like we probably just want to get rid of this, right? And then you can see the result of the join here. And so it's going to show me, in this case, it's picked a left outer join, which means it's going to always include everything from the left table and only if there's a match on the right. So I would basically scroll down through here and you'll see there's a bunch that don't have a match down here. So I don't know, again, this data set, does you expect there's always, which side is going to be the kind of the source table that's going to have all the rows you need versus the one that's just adding additional data points to this? Does that question make sense? Yeah, if there's not an answer, I can basically pick a full outer join just to see what's going on here. So now it's going to show me everything from the left and everything from the right, either where there's matches, right? So this is where there's a match for every one of these source IDs. And then here's, oops, so here's somewhere there's no match on the right, on this right side. But I don't see any, okay. So just by doing that, I don't see any blanks on the left. So that tells me that there's nothing that doesn't, you know, I've picked the join in the right direction. Does that make sense? So in other words, I'm not missing any rows on the left side. So I could use a left outer join for this. Okay, I'll stop there and see if there's any questions about what I've just talked about here. Actually, I should probably bump up this to 10,000 rows just to make sure. I don't know how much data is in here. I think it's everything.
Steve, the only question is actually from me. If just kind of going back to the beginning, if we don't have a copy of Spotfire yet on our computers, is there a 30-day trial available?
Yes, my apologies. Yes, I should have started with that. Okay. Yes, there is. You have to create an account on the TIBCO site. So, oops. I'll just find the actual link for you so you don't have to search for it. So it's going to be under the predict section. By the way, this is the one that does the no-code data science piece. So if you're interested in that, that's a very powerful product. So there's a free 30-day trial here, and I'll just put that in the chat. And I think what you have to do is you just have to create a signed-in account. You just have to basically give them all your information so they can start sending you emails, and then
exactly.
And I believe this is for the cloud version of Spotfire, so you'll actually be running this in a browser off the cloud. You won't have to actually install anything on your local machine. Now, there are going to be some limits to this. That's the only caution. It doesn't have necessarily every feature. And in fact, I suspect, I don't recall off the top of my head, there is a document that talks about the differences. There's one other option. I just thought of another option here. Let's just see if we can. So there's another site called eDelivery, and I'm just going to check if they let you download a free copy of the desktop. So you'll have to create an account. Actually, no, let me do this differently here. Yeah, you won't be able to create an account.
but the cloud version is available at least.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, and actually what I'll try to do is, there is a document that talks about the differences of what's available in the cloud versus the analyst version. So I'm running the analyst version here. So it's going to behave a little differently. And it has more features, especially when it comes to analytics, things like that. So depending what you're trying to do, some of this may or may not be available in the cloud version. But instead of taking time right now, let me follow up with the there's a PDF document that I can find that shows what features are available in each version, and we'll go from there. And then I'll also double check if there's a ability to download a trial with the desktop version. I don't think there is, but I'll just double check that for you. Okay.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just to recap then, I basically have created a new data table that's a join on source ID between these, and I'm going to do as a left outer join, and then, oh, sorry, I did a full. Let me go back to left outer join here. And that means that anything that doesn't have a match is going to show no values on the right-hand side, which is that second data table. Okay, so we'll just say okay here. So now I have I have 3 data tables in this visualization, the first 2 source ones, and then the joined one here. And so I can start to use that because it's got, is mapping important? Do you want to see how to do a map? Is that a good next step here?
I think it would be, yeah, just to show the
Sure.
locations of these emission plumes.
You bet. Okay. So there's the first step you have to do is make sure that that Spotfire recognizes the lat longs as location columns. So if you go to this icon here, this is the data analysis tab, and you'll see it'll list your data table. So we're going to go, it's showing the join table here. And then you can see though that it's, sorry, just remind me, oh yeah, source lat, here's source lat here. So right now it thinks it's a number column. So if you right click on this, you'll see that you can set the geocoding, and you can tell Spotfire that instead of it being a number field, it's actually a latitude column, and it'll put it under this location section. So that's really important. So it knows that that's actually a latitude. And then here's, oh, okay, that's source latitude. Is there a source longitude as well, or did I miss what that?
Just two spaces down from where your cursor was at. There
Here. Okay, perfect. I see there's a plume lat long and a source lat long. So let's grab both of those and make sure that we geoencode them. So this is our longitude for that. Yeah, this just tells Spotfire that these are lat longs basically. So this is lat, am I right? Lat, and then this is long. Okay, so now you'll see them under this, what's called location section. And you can just double check everything else. By the way, if you want to, you can rename these columns. Those are those 2 blank columns that were at the left-hand side. I don't know if they're critical or not, but you can rename them. If you notice here, there's a rename option. Maybe we can just see what those are. So if I look here, is this just a sequence number or something? Is there any importance to this column?
No, not from my perspective, no.
No? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so back to the data analysis. And by the way, this is, Phil mentioned at the beginning, this is actually what's known as the recommendation engine. So you can actually get a kickstart on building out visualizations if you pick certain columns. So for example, if we pick a lat long columns, it'll actually recommend a map chart, right? And so if you then say you want to, again, I don't know your use case very well here, but let's say you also want to pick, you have to hold down the control key when you click on these to select multiples. It'll start to recommend visualizations based on the columns you're picking. So in this case, because I've picked lat longs, it's showing me a map chart with a number of overflights. And also always there's a table object available to view the data itself. And so this recommendation engines can be really handy for you to quickly kind of put together some different options. If I take lat long out here, I'll see a few more options. Let's just maybe go date, time, and number of oops, sorry, holding the wrong key down. Again, it's the control key. And so let's say we pick those. So you can see it's giving you different kinds of options. And if you hover on these, it'll also give you more like this type of option. So it just kind of iterates through a bunch of different strategies on how it might show these different data points in visualizations. So it can be a really handy way to get a quick start on a visualization. Otherwise, you can always build these from scratch. But if you're not used to Spotfire and haven't worked with it much, this can be a really useful approach to get things. So again, let's say we're trying to look for a relationship between overflights versus Q plot for time. So let's pick that guy. So you just click on it and it'll create the visualization with everything set based on that recommendation. Does that make sense? Let me do another one. Let's just do a map real quick. So I'll pick this, and what we might want to show on a map, Q plume maybe. Oops, did the wrong buttons again. I'm on a Mac, by the way. That's why I keep hitting the wrong keys, because it's not like a PC. We'll just pick a map here. So there's a map chart. Okay. So that's the recommendations engine. I'm going to walk you through how to create a map chart from scratch. Now, map charts are they get very complex. So depending what you're trying to do, you can create all sorts of different things, layers, etc. I'll just quickly show you how to move things around in Spotfire. It's very simple. You just drag and drop visualizations so you can lay them out how you want. You'll see as you drag the header, it sort of shows you a gray area as to where it's going to drop that visual. You can also create tabs along the bottom here. So you can rename a tab. We'll call this map. You can add additional tabs. So you can also move visuals between pages. So let's say we decide we want this scatter plot to be on the other tab. You click and drag it to the tab here. You hover for a second and come back up again. It's really critical you come back up, otherwise it won't drop it there, and now it's dropped it on this page, and we'll call this scatter plot. And so now we have two separate tabs. It's different from Power BI in the sense that Power BI lets you build multiple visuals and then combine them in a report. In this case, with Spotfire, you just create these tabs, as many as you need. When you get to a certain point, if it filled up the area here, let me just add a bunch just to show you. Let's say you get multiple tabs like this. You'll get to the point where it can't display all the tabs. As I get there shortly. I'm just going to go back here. So you can see now it's got this scroll bar kind of idea. So you can scroll between the tabs. You can also click here to go and select a page. So it's kind of a quick drop down to grab that. There are different options for how this is displayed. This is the tabular view. If you right click over any of these, you'll get a whole menu of how to manage these tabs. You can delete them, or pages and tabs, but you can also change the navigation. So if you want to do it as a step-by-step or using history arrows, those are some other options. So that hides the tabs and forces you to have kind of a step-by-step page where you actually click on buttons to move from one tab to the next. So it's more of a browser type of approach. So I'm just kind of making you aware of some of these features. There's a lot more to cover than we can have time with. And so you can do a step-by-step approach or a history approach, or you can turn the tabs off altogether. This is generally the standard way you would show tabs. Okay, let's, is it worth then, okay, let me show you a bit of the features of a map chart. All the visuals have this ability to actually set different options in this legend, but you can also go to the full properties of any visual by clicking on this gear box that's up here, this gear, or right clicking on the visual and going to properties. So there's a couple ways to get to the properties. So if I decided, for example, I want a color by, I'm not sure why this chart's not showing. I guess this depends where this particular location is. Let's do that in a second. Let's say I want to color by something else. What was I doing here? I was doing size by plume. So again, I'm just throwing something out here. Let me color by number of overflights. So now you've got the ability to set different color ranges if you want to visual. I mean, the big part of visualization is you're trying to highlight what's important to whoever's visualizing this, right? Okay, so there's some interaction that can happen here based on this visual, or we can go into the properties. And this is really where you get into a lot of the detailed options. Map charts are a bit different. They have two levels of properties. They have the property of the map chart itself, and then you can actually go in and do the settings or the properties of each layer. Every map chart has a standard map layer that Spotfire provides, which looks like it's not, it could be a firewall issue. It might not be redrawing the map from, because it's actually hosted by TIBCO. Let me stop there and just ask a question. Is there anything that people have questions about so far?
No, Steve, doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat window. So just a reminder to everyone on the call, feel free to drop your questions into this monitor chat window. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't see that when I'm showing this in full screen mode. So let me just bring the chat up here, maybe on the side. Okay, there we go. And so basically, your layers are separate, have separate settings. So you can pick the layer and you can select it. Now you see all the details that we're seeing over here in terms of, you can set your size, your marker size. So we have a marker size based on plume, the sum of plume rather. We have we could do shapes. Right now it's a fixed circle or shape, but you can also shape it by column values. You can create pies. You can also set custom labels. So you can label these. Let's see if there's something that would, let's say candidate ID. So now you can see all the labels available. You can also determine if it shows it for all or only when you mark. So there's a concept called marking, which I'll talk about in a bit more. It's really Spotfire's designation for how you select things on a visual. So in this case, we can select data points. If it's on a scatter plot, it would be the various dots that are the markers that are on the scatter plot. And that's how you mark data within Spotfire to select it. And so in this case, if I show the markers only by labels, it's by selecting those, I can see the marker coming up, right? So that label's only coming up on the marked rows. So that gives you an option there. Tooltips is anything that when you hover, it pops up a little tooltip, so you can customize that. And you can add additional data from your data set that you hover. So let's say we want to show IPC sector when we're doing this. So when we hover now, we see that first. Now, you'll notice it's got the actual aggregation that's involved. So this is basically showing me for that data point, because data sets can be aggregations, it's showing me the first IP sector. But if we want to get rid of that, you can actually put this as a label. So we can call it IPC sector. So in all of these sort of column designations, you can always give it a name so that it's more visually appealing to whoever's reading this. So now we see IPC sector, that type of idea. Okay. Colors, size. So colors is quite extensive. And I'm only going to be able to kind of really gloss over the top, the surface here, but there's various color modes that you can use for this. Right now it's a gradient, but you can also create segments where you can actually put in different color points based on values between your man and you can set fixed values. And you can also do unique values. So you can actually have it color code every single unique value there if you wanted to. And you'll see the legend shows up over here on the right. You can also, if you go here, there's some different visual kind of predefined options. So maybe outliers or something, or continuous, that type of thing. So there's all sorts of color coding functionality available, depending on how you're trying to visually represent these values on this map. Just trying to think of what else is relevant here. If you want to, okay, so that's working with that marker layer. So you'll see there's different types of layers. So map layers, and if I go to add here, you can see marker layers are really grabbing data from your data set and showing it as on the map. Feature layers is the ability to bring in other, map layers is the ability to bring in other layers. So if you want to overlay other maps that you have, you can source them from the internet. You can even also add images as a part of your map layer. And this is another type of layer that's available, WMS. So each of these is different types of layers. So map layer, TMS, or WMS is supported. And so, for example, if you go out and Google, free map layers, WMS or something like that, you'll see there's all sorts of available WMS layers, National Map Service, this type of thing. So if you're trying to add additional layers into your map beyond the default, which should be, let me just find out why. I'm going to zoom out here. Oops, I'm out. Whereabouts is this data? Whereabouts are we located here? Oh, here we go. Okay, so we were just zoomed in too far. So this is the default map that Spotfire, that TIBCO provides, which is a map of the world. And so it's showing me here. The problem seems to be when I zoom in on this, I think it's just not loading the counties and things like that. You should be able to zoom right into the actual roads and features. You shouldn't have a problem. I think it's just because of the server I'm on. I don't have access to that particular map. You can also go and grab additional map layers that are your street maps. So for example, if I go back and Google that. Again, I don't know what features you're looking for. There's terrain maps, there's things like that that you can include here. Let me see if I can actually if you look here, this drop down shows you what your layers are. So you can see, you can turn layers on and off. So I can turn off the map. This is our data set layer, right? So when I mark things here, I'm interacting with that actual data type of thing. Marking's a really important topic because I assume you're going to create visuals where you want to select something and then have it show you the detail behind that, for example. So you can create new visualizations either by going to this drop down here. So this is all of the built-in visuals that are available. What you can also do is create what's called a details visualization, which creates some interaction between these. So if you right click over this map chart, for example, you can see create details visualization. Let's create just a regular table. And so this is now based on what I select here. I'm going to see the detail rows here. Let's move that over. And so this is now what's called a table object. So of course it can be customized. You can double click here and say detail rows. You can add or remove columns. So if you click on your column header, you can hide a column, right? Yeah, you can move things around. It's a bit like Excel. You can kind of drag the columns over. Maybe we'll put this here. We'll remove this. We'll drag our time over. Okay. If you also wanted to plot this, you can also do a detailed visualization, which is a line chart. And again, it's going to guess on what you want to show as your axes, but we'll drag this over here to the right. Now, what this is doing is it's creating what's called interaction with marking. So you can see here, this data limiting is set to the marking. So let me show you how you interact with the marking features of any of these visualizations. So you can see when I don't have anything selected here or marked, nothing shows up here because these are limited by what's been selected with this particular marking. It's called, it's a blue, it's colored blue and it's called marking. It's colored blue because when I select things, it's not going to show here. Let me just, when I select things with that marking, okay, we must have more than one marking. Just give me a sec here. So if we go to document properties, you can see the markings that have been set up. We're going to go here. So we've got 2 markings created and you can rename these. So we'll rename this to, this is the default one that's provided. We'll call this map marking. And then this one can be details marking. And you can create more markings as needed. what that's essentially telling me is that when I mark these now, I could, for example, switch this visual to be dependent on marking over here. So I've got the map to here, and then this to this visual here. So I'm going to go into the properties. Sorry, I'm going to use the gear because that's more intuitive. And you go to the data tab, and you'll see here's where it's setting the markings. So what it's actually doing is it's using the details marking for both of these visuals. So we're going to turn this off. We're going to say none, no marking on this graph. And we're going to make this graph dependent on selection of this marking over here. So we're going to switch off from the map and switch on to the details. Okay. And I know I'm showing this really quickly, but so now there's a 3-level kind of marking option here. When I pick this, that tells me that shows the detail here. And when I click this, it then charts it over here. So this is dependent on this, and this is dependent on this. So let me pick a few more things here. Okay, let me stop. Okay, no questions in the chat. Everybody's good so far. Is this the right level of detail for everybody, or I know we have a limited time here?
I think it is, Steve. Like a lot of it is
okay.
really just like leaving some breadcrumbs for our participants.
Okay.
So I think this is a good overview.
Okay, so that's kind of the basics of marking. There's a lot more features involved. For example, you could have 2 visuals and have, just let me go back into the properties for this. Sorry, I'll use the gearbox. So be aware there's some advanced features with marking where you can actually have it be based on 2 or more markings, and it can be all, or it can be an and or an or combination. So this is saying now either I select something from the map and this visual is affected by that, or I select something from this detail row. And so I've made both of those the limiters, and it's and. If I say or, then it's one or the other, right? And so you can also set some expectation of what happens if you don't have anything selected. I'm going to go back to just a single marking just to make that clear. And so you can actually, instead of showing empty if nothing's selected, you can say show all data, or you can have it show a message. So mark items on list to left to show details here. So now if I have nothing, and there's a marking drop down. If you right click on this, you can go here and you can unmark everything. So now you can see it's showing me that message as a result of that selection. I would also point out this has sort features, so you can sort. And to do multiple sorts, you just click on these pluses or minuses. So again, similar to Excel, so you can start with the primary sort. Let's do it by date. So just click on this, start by date, and then we'll add time into that. And then we'll add type into that. So it's just progressively adding more and more sorts to this visual here. Okay. Let's see, I've covered off the data canvas. I've covered off how to create visuals. There is another feature in Spotfire, and I don't know whether you'll have time for this or not, but there's something called mods. These are add-in visuals. And you can download them from the Spotfire community site. I'll get the link for you here. So unlike the built-in visuals, these are all that's available for built-in, but there are additional mods available that let you do other types of visuals. And so you'll see examples of that here. And so, for example, there's gauge mods. There's a whole bunch of different ones available. Now, they can be a bit tricky to install. They're fairly straightforward. You do have to be working with the latest version. And I don't know if the cloud version lets you install these. So that's one of the things that might be a problem. But I just want to make sure you're aware of them. So if there is a visual that you can't quite create that you need, there may be a mod for that. You just may be constrained by the cloud version. Let me find the chat here. So I'll just give you that little tidbit in case it's useful. Each mod will have an explanation of how to install it. So let's say we'll look at the sunburst here. Haven't used this one. So they'll have a download. You can actually test it in, there we go, try this mod. That's probably a demo, so it's probably not something you can install, but you'll see here is the downloads of the versions, and there'll be a PDF that explains how to install it and how to use it with these. Yeah, so I just want to make sure you guys were familiar with that. Okay, so if we just go through the menus real quick. So we've covered off adding data. We've covered off the data analysis, setting your location types. We've covered off the visuals. We'll get to data functions in a second. Just to go through the menus really quickly, we talked about document properties. So this is where you can see the markings. You can actually interact with the markings through that other screen as well. Let me talk about, and we talked about filters. Oh, we haven't talked about filters. Okay, so let's go to view. Okay, so there's a bunch of optional views that you could turn on. So one is called filters. And this is basically, zoom that out of the way. This is basically a built-in filter panel that Spotfire provides. It gives you every column, every data set, and you can see it's a hierarchical list, so I can compress the data sets I'm looking at. Now, if I know that I don't need these two data sets on this particular page, you can right-click and hide that data table. So I'm going to hide those two data tables. You'll also notice this is named kind of funny. You can also rename your data tables. I'll show you that in a second. So now I've just got filters that apply to this particular data set. So for example, I can turn on and off, and you can see it's filtering the data based on that. It's setting a default set of ways that it's showing these. So for number fields, it shows a range. But if you hover over any of these and click here, there'll be this little filter thing that pops up. So you click on the filter, you'll see these three lines. You can then select a different filter type. So let's say we go to a filter list here. So now it's showing me a list. And so you can explore different filter types that are available, range, item. Some don't apply because of the type of data that it is. But you can see here, for example, type. Let's say we want that, instead of being a checkbox, we want that to be a radio button, right? So now that means I can only pick one of these, or empty or none type of thing. You can also hide or show. So let's say we don't want to filter on this column 1. Again, if you right click on it, you can say hide filter. Okay. Yeah, so that's sort of how you can customize this. You can also drag these up and down. You can move them around, right? So you can sort of get them in a sequence that makes more sense. You can also create groups. So let's say you want to group a bunch together. You can create a group. We'll call this lat long. Oops, lat. Or let's call it location. Okay, and so now I've got this this locations group here, and so I can drag columns or fields to that. So I can just drag them up. Yeah. You have to actually hover on the location, and now this becomes like a little folder. And so let's just drag source guy here, drag over top. So it just creates a way of creating another layer of managing these filters. And of course, I could find the other lat longs and drag them up. Now, all of this can also be done through a more advanced screen. So if you right click on the very top here and you say organize filters, this brings up basically an organized filters dialog that lets you do all the same things we just did, but through this dialog. So I can turn data tables on and off, and I can turn columns, and I'll just keep those two off. So you can see, I can decide I don't want to show, I don't want to filter on column 1 here, and maybe I'll remove some of these other ones just to show you. Again, this is your decision on what you show here, but you can see my filter list is getting much shorter, right? And also you'll see that the group is here. And so you can select this and you can create new groups, or you can move something to. So if I find my other lat longs here, move to group, locations, and then select it here, move to group, locations. So I'm basically organizing that. Okay, and say okay. Okay. Make sense? That's the filter panel. Now there's more advanced ways. I don't want to get too much into this because this is more advanced, but just to be aware, again, if you're Spotfire people on the team that have done this before, rather than use this built-in filter panel because it's somewhat limited in customizability and look and feel, you can also use something called a text area. Here we go. And this lets you, if you edit this text area, you can build out, you can add your specific filters you want, right? Here's filters that you can pick. So I can say I want to see, you know, source ID here. And then you can also, this is very similar to like building a web page. You can add text in here. You can bold and color it, add images. You can create lists. So you can explore this as a way of creating a more custom way of providing filters. Source ID, colon.
Hey, Steve, there's a question in the chat about maybe an example of splitting a column based on string. Is that similar to what you're showing here? We're doing filtering text.
No, split. There's different ways to do that. We're kind of getting. There's a built-in set of functions. I don't use these a lot, but if you click on a column here in the data analysis, and if you go to this gearbox here, then you can do some work here to create calculations. And I believe there was a split. What would be an example of a column here you'd be splitting? Like, is there some delimiter that you're looking for? Or
yeah, I'll quickly chime in. So you'll see on your screen, Steve, there was ones that were labeled kind of GAO and ones that were labeled ANG on the candidate ID. So those are like two different methods in which the universities measured the methane plumes. So
okay.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll see ANG as the start, and then some of the identifiers are GAO.
Yeah. So you can see here. So when I go into the data analysis and I click this, you'll see, first off, it'll show you unique values. It lets you explore the data, but you'll see there's this split column option here. And so this is a quick way of either splitting it by delimiter or by number of characters. So if it's always ANG, so 0, and unfortunately, I don't use this feature very often because I generally do the direct calculation. Let me just remember how to use this here. So number of characters remove from beginning. Split using this separator. I believe. Honestly, don't remember how to use this. Sorry. From beginning, let's try this. Let's see what this. It will show us a preview of what it's trying to do, but I think this is only using a separator character now that I'm thinking of it. Okay, if not, I'll show you quickly then how to do a calculated column. Apologies, I just don't use that feature very often. What I generally do is I go and create a calculated column. So let's go here and I'll show you quickly how to create calculate columns from the data source. And I just want to check our time here. I think I'm good. If you guys are, let me just check my schedule real quick here. No, unfortunately, I have a hard stop at 1:30. Okay, so calculated columns is here. You see this plus sign on the data set. You can add a calculated column. You can also get to this through this data menu, calculated columns, column properties. So both take you to the same spot. So you can insert calculated columns. And so, for example, we could take that candidate ID, and there's a whole bunch of functions. This is very similar to Excel. So we could do a split, or that's actually what we can do is go to the text functions here, and you'll see a list of all the different ones. So, for example, you could do a left, right? So it's going to return and it'll tell you here, it'll tell you here in the help examples of how to do this. So if we want to grab the first 3 columns from this, and then we just give it a column name. So we'll call this prefix. You'll call it obviously what you want. It'll also show you a sample result. Okay. You can also do a write, right? So if we want to grab the first 3 columns from here, that creates that column. And so you'll see it's now added a calculated column here. And that's actually what that other function was doing, was it was creating a calculated column. So this might have more flexibility. And I just grabbed the first 3 characters of that column. So we can go add another calculated column that would grab. And again, I'm assuming, are these always consistently the same length, or is there?
It's a good question. I know it's the same 3 characters, first 3
Yeah.
characters. That's about it.
So, so what you might have to do is do a mid then, perhaps, instead. So we'll do a mid function. And we're just going to grab everything from column. So again, we'll grab from column 3 to 999, something like that. Oh, sorry, 4, not 3. Oops, 4. And we'll call this candidate ID only, something like that. Okay, but you'll see a preview here. You can also preview this, and it'll basically grab the first 100 rows and show you what your result is. So it'll show you the original source string, and then it'll show you so in this case, I just grabbed everything from column 4 on. You could also do the split on this dash. I guess that's what this was doing here. So that actually did create a calculated column when I did it from the data analysis page, and you could see examples of what it's doing here. So you could split it. You could split it up to the dash and then have 2 separate columns there, that type of thing. Okay. So now I've added another column, which was just the right-hand side of that. Is that sufficient to get everybody kind of started there? In the time remaining, I just want to quickly go through some of the menus so you're familiar with what's here. So we've talked about filters, visuals, we're good there. Let me close the data canvas because everything gets dimmed. Just want to mention that there's some built-in features for some different types of modeling or clustering. Obviously don't have time to go through all these in detail, but you can explore some of those. And then the other thing is you can either use Tear or Python. So Tear is R code. So if you are going to try to write some R code, what you're essentially doing is you're creating data functions for that. So that's this data tab. And so you can register a new function. So you can create your R script here. You can see R script. You can also do Python. And unfortunately, there's a lot more involved than I probably have time to show here. But basically, if we do an R script, you can create input parameters. I don't know what data type it is, right? And then an output parameters. I'll just show you this really quick. Result. And it might be a table that's an output, or a column, or a value. We'll see if it's a table. So basically, when you use this function, you can basically attach it to data in your data tables as inputs, and then have it spit data out as a data table as a result. So whatever your R code does, it can read the input parameters, right? And maybe it's a data table as well, do some stuff with it and spit out a resulting table or something like that. So you can call some R modeling capabilities. And it's the same for Python. It's the same idea if you decide to use Python.